hit podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As with every week, we're dropping into your feed on Tuesdays with what we hope are bite-sized, digestible, but really well curated conversations of the important topics going on in the space. This week's episode will be no exception to that. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Kevin and Jennifer, thank you guys so much for joining me. I want to hit this right off the top. Employer workplace violence programs, legislators saying what we have to do. It's here. We need to talk about it. Do you mind introducing yourselves? And Kevin, I'll do a Jennifer first here so that we can take this in across. But Jennifer, let me know a little bit about kind of who you are and why you're qualified to speak on this.
Sure. So I have been practicing law since 2012. And I did employment law for the duration of my legal practice. And then as of 7 years ago, I transitioned into exclusively doing workplace safety and health. And under Kevin's mentorship, I've had the opportunity to actually watch regulations go into effect, to provide advice and counsel to clients, and to participate in litigation. So I'm excited to be here because this is what we do day in and day out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Kevin?
I'm glad you let Jennifer go first because I was wondering the same thing. Why did you have me come? No. Actually, I've been practicing workplace safety for 20 years. And I sat on the workplace violence. I sat on the advisory committee. Was involved with the healthcare workplace violence when that was brought into place a few years ago. I go to all the standards board meetings. So besides being a Cal OSHA litigator in the context of appeals, I also sat on advisory committees in the development of regulation. And then in this unique circumstance, working with like the Cal Chamber and different entities on trying to get the language in the bill that would work for employers. As you'll hear today, some of it probably wasn't as successful in getting it in there, but that's all I do day in and day out. And in my previous life, I had to work for a living. I wasn't an attorney. So I was in construction and in the crane business as a Cal OSHA accredited crane inspection company. So I've lived and breathed OSHA for probably 30 years now. Well, yeah, almost 40 if you count my ironworking days.
That's awesome. I happen to know that, and it's because we had you guys out for a seminar here at Montage, which was one of our most well-attended, incredibly well-reviewed. You guys did amazing, and you're allowing me to do today what I do annoyingly and or best, which is, hey guys, you know that 3-something hour topic that has a lot of detail? You think we could mush that into, I don't know, 20 minutes and give it to our audience in the podcast format? So God bless you for even tackling this. Thank you very much. And we're talking a little bit ahead of time about how busy you guys are these days. Just curious, why do you think it's such a hot topic right now? Obviously.
Well, in the news, this has been workplace violence. I mean, we think of it in the context more often of shooting. We just had the shooting that we heard about, unfortunately, in Nevada and Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago that happened to be on the same floor as our office in Las Vegas. We harbored some of the victims in our office during that period. We had a mushroom, which prompted the mushroom farm shootings not too long ago. And of course, workplace violence in the grand context, besides the shootings, a big deal, and it's getting a lot of attention. And so now it's focusing on trying to get the employers to get their head wrapped around it. And now they're going to be issuing citations if we don't get our head wrapped around it. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I think this is just a logical extension of probably where we've been going for so long. I mean, as you probably know, this has been in existence in the healthcare industry, which has been really necessary with the types of patients that they deal with and the type of situations that arise. And then over the past 5 years, school shootings have become more and more prevalent, unfortunately. And there are employers there or employees there that have had to kind of figure out a way to manage those situations as well. So while I think maybe people don't necessarily think of office buildings as the place where, shootings happen or any kind of violence would occur, I do think it's logical that this is where the legislation has gone in trying to create regulations.
Can we just pause a minute and talk about what this, on the off chance, one of my listeners just crawled out from under a rock. What is the legislation? What's the timing? What's the mandate?
So effective July 1st of this year, all employers who are not already part of the healthcare standard need to institute a workplace violence prevention plan. And that's kind of a general term because it includes trainings and policies and procedures. And it's basically to just reduce the risk of workplace violence at an employer site for their employees.
Yeah, and I'm curious. So, what are some of the greatest challenges that employers are facing when they try to bring in a workplace violence program?
I'll say the biggest issue that we get feedback on, well, there's a couple. One is the training aspect, because in the labor code itself that promulgated this requirement requires an interactive discussion during the training, and the training has to be contoured to your workplace. So the old days of, like, we remember the sexual harassment training that everybody has to do every year, that can be canned. The same program can go to 20 million different and places of employment. Here, it's going to be unique. So it's going to take a lot of effort on that. Second part is assessing each individual workplace to identify what issues that create potential exposures under workplace violence. So you can imagine if you've got 5 different sites, or you're a remote site company where you're out, like say a cable company, every one of those houses that you go to install cable technically is a new work site.
Right.
So there's some large challenges that come with that.
Yeah, Jennifer, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's a big attitudinal shift as well.
Yeah.
I mean, in 4 years ago, when we had the COVID regulation pass, employers who just wanted to keep their employees safe realized this was a huge undertaking. They were going to have to have all of these positive steps that they were going to have to take in order to, number one, show that they were compliant, and number two, demonstrate to their employees that, their safety and health was of the utmost importance. And I think the workplace violence reg kind of follows along with that, is that there are a lot of proactive things that an employer has to do to show they're compliant, and to show to the employees that, they want to keep them safe and they want to prevent violence in the workplace.
I mean, that's a great on-ramp to my next question, which is what can employers do now, right?
Yeah, the most important thing they can do is get their program developed and in place now, because I get this question all the time. Hey, we have till July 1st. Are they going to start enforcing on July 1st? Or are they going to give us some time to get compliant and get the program and get all the training? The answer to that is no, you're not going to have time to do it like you do sometimes, because we knew what the regulation was. The community knew as soon as the governor signed the bill back in October of last year. And so there isn't going to be a grace period. So if you haven't started on it now, you need to get started on it, because time's clicking. It's going by like crazy.
Yeah, and part of the seminar we had you guys out for, we had an insurance carrier here as well, right? Talking about from their angle how they can help. We obviously, as insurance consultants, are out there helping for our employees, and you guys are obviously here and doing this for employers. I mean, when you say, hey, get going, hey, draft a program, what are some of the things they need to have in it? Where are some places they can turn? I mean, if you're an employer listening going, oh, wow, I have this thing coming down the pike I need to adhere to, how can I make sure I'm properly adhering to it?
I think a big thing is really no different than what employers have had to do under their IIPP, or Injury and Illness Prevention Plan, which is to recognize hazards, correct the hazards, and train according to those hazards. So I think the overarching umbrella of what employers are being expected to do is probably one and the same. As Kevin mentioned, there are a lot of specifics that are under this, regulation, like figuring out what workplaces, you as an employer are trying to have covered. Are you an office space? Are you a warehouse? Are you a construction site? How do all of those relationships come into play when you're recognizing hazards or when you're providing training? How do your business relationships matter? Do you use staffing employees? And if you do, what exactly are you doing to make sure that your staffing employees are trained? So there's a lot that's going on right now, and there's a lot of factors that employers have to actually recognize.
I'm gonna add to that too, because I think part of your question was how can an employer go about getting started?
Yeah.
Well, Cal OSHA has finally put a sample plan, a sample log and information on their website. And then we also, I don't want it to just be a sales pitch, but we also sell a template plan we put together months ago, which is very close to it. It's just the word of warning. the Cal OSHA template has a couple things in there that aren't actually required, that I think, I use the term fishhook, that can rope you into maybe some liability that you didn't need to be putting into your plan. For example, it has the CEO sign accepting the plan. There isn't anything in the law that says that has to be done, and a couple things on their log that they have you do. So if you do go with the free plan that is on Cal OSHA's website, have an attorney, your attorney, whoever knows the workplace safety reg, review it and cull it. But that'll get you about 80% of the way there with our template, or the Cal OSHA template that's out there. And then the other 20%, you're gonna have to roll your sleeves up and kind of look at your specific places and fill in some of those blanks, and then getting the training components going.
Yeah. And obviously that's today. Curious where you see the future of workplace violence prevention.
Well, I predict that we're going to see a lot of, for lack of a better term, paperwork violations. People not having their plan squared away, missing an element, not having the right information there, not logging the incidents with enough detail to pass muster. The thing that also comes up is, let's say you have a forklift accident, has nothing to do with workplace violence. They're going to come out and then they're going to ask, hey, because they get to do this, review things that have nothing to do, like your outdoor heat illness plan, your workplace violence plan, your hazard communication plan, whatever it is, they can ask and review it. We saw this in COVID. They come out for a forklift accident and also want to see your COVID plan to make sure you had it in place. So we're going to see that. And then, God forbid, if there is a reportable workplace violence incident where someone is injured or a shooting, it's going to be 20/20 hindsight, and they're going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. So be prepared for that. So a lot of citations will be issued, I think, in the next year or two on workplace violence, inefficiencies in plans if you don't get squared away early.
Jennifer, when you get out your crystal ball, anything to add?
I mean, I just think when regulations come to pass, there's always a lot of the novelty of it creates a lot of, the hubbub that comes with employers. And kind of what Kevin is saying is that probably what we're going to see over the next few months is that even if the accident has nothing to do with workplace violence, it's going to play a role. I do think it will probably temper out a little bit in a few years. Maybe once the next hot topic comes to play, or the next big regulation. I mean, Kevin and I were talking about the fact that indoor heat is coming down the pike, or, wildfire smoke was a big thing for a long, long time. So I think it just depends on what California deems to be the most salient topic. And then I think workplace violence will kind of peter out in terms of how popular it is.
Yeah, well, your phone doesn't seem to have any shortage of rings coming through for now. So, so for an employer listening, if we could maybe circle back with a bow and a button on this bad boy here. There's a requirement that's coming down the pike where on July 1st, they have to have a program in place. And there are some templates that can guide them, but it's probably best practices. Sure, you guys sell a template and that's great and that's fine. But even like you said, have your attorney look at it, have someone look at it. So this needs to be on everyone's radar and they have to take action items. What are some kind of other recommendable practices or steps? Or if you're an employer listening and you're trying to go, okay, I'm aware, and maybe I'll Google it and look up the legislation or whatever, and I'll look at the template and bounce it off my attorney. What else would you say to an employer listening to this while we're on this topic?
Well, I'm going to just start out and say that just because the regulation isn't in effect, that never stops Cal OSHA from going after employers. So there is still an IIPP citation, or a regulation, I should say, that employers need to maintain a safe workplace under that. So July 1st is an operative date, but that's not a hard start for all of this. The thing I would also tell employers, maybe a concrete thing to consider, is maybe just start doing an inspection of your work site, looking around, seeing where there are risks. Do you find that you're probably not in the best neighborhood, for example? Do you think you should have more cameras? Do you think that maybe you need to try and look at exits and entrances and see if maybe those need to be secure? I don't think that this is something that would be a surmountable task if people wait until late June to be able to do. And so I think maybe just kind of getting a start about the logistics of your work site is a great place to start here and today.
Kevin?
And I'll add to that. I think big thing they need to do too is get their training, start figuring out how they're going to do their training, how logistically it's going to be. If you've got 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 employees, they have to be trained by July 1st and have your onboarding starting to develop in that. And so the training component, I think, is going to be the heaviest lift of all of this. So getting started on that, I think is vital sooner rather than later.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's great. I think this is really, important stuff. And again, our goal here, I recognize this was a multi-hour seminar when you guys came out, full room, great reviews, by the way, but kind of taking this. So for the listeners that clue in every week and just want to be kept abreast of some of the stuff coming down the pike, any parting thoughts on the topic in general?
Well, I first want to thank you for the opportunity and for your listeners to listen to us drone on about a topic that sometimes is hard to make fun and exciting. And the step one, after they get done listening to this, is Google and find the sample plan so they can get their head wrapped around what kind of the skeletal portion of a plan is. And I think that will get them a long way.
Cool.
I just want to thank you as well for having us here. This is such an important topic right now, and it starts before July 1st, as I already said. So I love that employers are, having this on their radar and trying to get started.
No, I appreciate your guys' time so much. And you mentioned the IAPP, and that's obviously something, I know we do for our clients. So if we're handling your workers' compensation, so turn to your insurance brokers, consultants, turn to, vendor partners or professional friends like our firm if you need help with that sort of a thing. You guys mentioned you have a template. So there's a lot of resources out there. I appreciate your guys' time so very much. Thank you guys for being on. That's all the time we have this week on the HIT podcast. Thank you to our sponsor, TrueHue. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Join us next week. Join us every week. And until next week, make this the best week yet.